How do the best players in the world warm up? We work with Team USA to show you their 10-minute warm-up. Before we get into that though, what's the purpose of a good warm-up? I think there are two goals. One, to prevent injury, and two, to facilitate muscle activity. That being said, a good warm-up entails a progression of three things: slower controlled motor movements, static stretching, and functional movements. Casey Smith, head Olympic athletic trainer, takes us through the first progression.
We start with a walking knees to chest. Basically, we're looking to start some slow stretching through the larger muscle groups, in this case being the hamstrings and the lower back. We'll progress to a walking pull the heels back, where we're addressing the hip flexors and the quads. We'll progress to an opposite elbow to knee, which brings in a rotational component, still for the hips, hamstrings, adding the low back and abdominals a little bit. We'll go to a walking hips up and out, which is kind of the opposite motion of the hips across, so it's getting our groin involved a little bit. It's working still with the hip and lower back. We'll do a straight leg kick with a clap, which is almost primarily hamstring, and the clap just adds to make sure they get it to a sufficient height that they can clap underneath.
So to recap, the first progression is slower controlled motor movement, and you do each exercise the full length of the court one time. Here's the list of that first progression: walking knees to chest, walking pull heels back, opposite elbow to knee, walking hips up and out, and straight leg kick with a clap. The second progression is static stretching. Take a look.
We start with a butterfly stretch. It's important for us to keep the feet equally opposed to each other and for the chest to be up during that. We progress to a seated crossover stretch, which works the low back and the glute musculature. We'll do a leg in, leg up, leg out series, which will go from low back to hamstring to glute, low back, hamstring combined. Next, we'll go to a seated figure four stretch, which will address the specifically rotating musculature of the hip, which in basketball can commonly be tight in our athletes. We'll go next over on our stomach to a prone on elbows, which will start to stretch the abdominal muscles, and we'll progress that to where they're pressing up on their hands from their elbows, which will be more so of the abdominals and the hip flexor muscles. Then we'll go to a prone quadricep stretch, and what we want to do with this is we want to grab the opposite hand and foot so that we're pulling the knee in its natural position. We're not rotating it out too much. Then we'll go to prone scorpions, which is where we're reaching our legs up and over to try to touch near our waist level. For low back, hip flexors, a little bit of quad stretching with that. We'll progress that to a calf stretch, both right and left, and then both together. And then we'll go into a lunge stretch with our elbow down toward our instep of our foot for our groin and hip musculature there at the end.
With the static stretching exercise, you want to make sure that you don't hold any of the stretches over 30 seconds because your muscles aren't fully warm. Here's the list: butterfly, seated crossovers, leg in, leg up, leg over, figure four, prone on elbows and on hands, prone scorpions, calf stretches, right, left, and then both, and finally the lunge stretch. The last progression is functional movements, and these will be performed at about 50 to 80%.
We start with a light skip, and basically what we're doing is just trying to fire our hip flexors to get our knees up and fire our gastroc and quads a little bit as we skip. We'll go to a back pedal just to work on a little bit of foot strike, a little bit of foot quickness. We'll go to a carioca just to allow ourselves to accelerate and decelerate our upper body and lower body independently. We'll do some side hops with the arms up. Again, a lot of our sport is performed with our arms up, rebounding, shooting, things like that. We want to make sure we get those involved as well. We'll do a high skip at the end, which is a little more motor firing of the gastrocs, quads, and hip flexors. We'll do some long strides at the end just to finally involve the major muscles of our lower body at a near a game speed.
To recap, the third progression is functional movements, and you want to do each exercise the full length of the court except for the last exercise, long strides. You'll go down and back. Here's the list: light skips, back pedal, carioca, side hops with arm swings, high skips, and long strides. For your reference, here's a list of the entire warm-up together. It's a 10-minute warm-up that targets the exercises necessary to prepare players with what they need in order to perform at their highest level.